Hi, this is Jaya. In this video, we shall see the summary of Indian Reservation Caughnawaga by A.M. Klein. Come, let's go to the summary. A.M. Klein, that is Abraham Moses Klein, is an American poet, journalist, short story writer and a lawyer, and he was born on February 14th of 1908, and he is one of the leading writers in Jewish culture, and his most notable works are The Rocking Chair and other poems. And the awards he has received are many, but the most important one among them are Governor General's Award and Lone Pierce Medal. And in this poem, that is Indian Reservation Caughnawaga, he has written for the Red Indians. Caughnawaga means Red Indians, and these Red Indians were a group of tribes in the Indian Reservation of the United States of America. And the poem is Indian Reservation. Indian Reservation is the official designation which they have given to the tribes of America. And in this poem, A.M. Klein beautifully says about the impact of the Western culture on these Red Indians' traditional life. And he talks about the plight of the native Indians in this poem. Actually, that is the theme of the poem also. And he says that where is the identity of this Red Indians? So, this poem can be taken as a poem which searches for the Red Indians' identity. And he says that the history has now become a commodity in the market, and you cannot see any of these Red Indians now except them who are kept as statues in the museum. It does not mean that there are no Red Indians. He says that the Red Indians are totally changed now to the Western culture. And here he speaks from the prospect of a speaker who is looking at the picture of a native in a book. And when he sees the picture in the book, he says that this native Indian looks so courageous and noble. They are savages, but the courageous and nobleness gives them an identity. And there are totally 5 stanzas in the poem. And the first stanza itself bewails the fate of these tribes, because it starts with a question about these people. And he says that these Indian tribes were vigorous and brave, and he mentions them as autumn fruits because they are in possession of ripe wisdom. And he says they lived in natural surroundings, and they painted their bodies with red paint, and they decorated their head with tall feathers, and they used only metals as ornaments. And he actually longs to see the Red Indian, and he says that he can visualize the Red Indian standing at the frontispiece gazing at the children walking out. That means it is not that the father is inside the house and looking at his child who is outside. It means that the Red Indians had the tradition of passing down their knowledge to their children. And he says that he is very anxious to meet the monosyllabic chief who speaks in a gruff and gruntal voice, which shows that he has authority, and it shows that he has control over his people. And he also calls these Red Indians as Feathered Bestiaries because they always will wear fur and feathers only as they garments, and we can compare them with mystic animals like the chief, running deer, black bear and old buffalo. And he also calls them as Aesop's animals because they were all enlightened and talented, and they were resourceful. And he says definitely the colonizers could not have lived in this land without help from these native people. And in the second stanza, he describes how as a child he had a strong feeling to go and join with these Red Indians so that he can escape from the classroom chalk dust, varnish smell and the water dust of the street, and he can live with them in a clean environment. And he wants to go and meet the chief who lived with his people and who enjoyed with the life with nature. And he says that he was always anxious to see the chief whom he has seen only in the calendar, but he has forgotten as a child, or he was not informed as a child, that he can never see a Red Indian whom he sees in the picture. He can only see the westernized version of him as the generation has changed themselves. And then afterwards he proceeds to explain how these Red Indians have degraded, how they have lost their traditional way of life, how they have lost their identity because they were looped by this Western culture, and now they are not even naming themselves in their own traditional way, but they are only keeping French names for them, and they do not paint themselves with red paint or do not wear bronze jewels. And he uses the word expunge to say that these things can never be brought back again. And then he talks about the deplorable condition, because he says that they no longer wear the vegetable outfit which used to be like a puffed like a tent, but he says that they have gone down to the level of beggars, because he can see their children fight in the dust to pick up the brown pennies which are thrown by the tourists at the church doors. And he says that they look so tattered and they are like beggars, and their lives are doomed, and they only bite the dust to earn their living. And in the final stanza, he refers to the past and the present, and he really laments because now these Red Indian civilization has now become a saleable commodity in the market. And he says that whatever things they used in the past can be sold in the shop, and that is how they really earn their money. And these things are beaded shoes, the sweet grass baskets, the burnt wood with which they used to decorate their body, and the gaudy clothes and the inch canoes. All these are now affordable for sales in the market. And he says even now they decorate themselves with feathers and dance a traditional dance, but that is only when they are paid money, that is when they receive a bribe to dance in front of a white mayor, to show that they are still practicing their traditional dances. And he says that all this happened only because of colonization, and now poverty has covered them, and now they no longer live with the pride and dignity in which they lived in the earlier days. And the grassy ghetto is no more their home, and it is only kept in the museum where we can go and see. And they no more hunt, because earlier hunting was part of their life, because only through hunting they can get their food, but now they cannot hunt for their food. And even the Red Indians, the original Red Indians, are kept like mummified dolls, like how the stuffed animals are kept in the museum. And he says that earlier, like how animals hunt for food, these people also hunted, risking their life. But all that is no more in their life, and all that way of life and the tradition we can only see in the museum. And in the museum also they look so pale, and with the bleached bodies only they are shown to the people who come to the museum. And most of them have come out from their native religion, and they have converted them to Christianity. And he says that these Red Indians have rejected the glorious past, which he calls as ghost, because now they are not at all original. Nothing originality is there in them, and they have lost their identity. And that is how he ends the poem, by mentioning them as ghosts. Come, let's go and read the poem. He begins the poem like asking, where are the braves, the faces like autumn fruit? So when he is asking about where are the braves itself, the title tells us that it is about the Red Indians, because we already saw that Caughnawaga means Red Indians, and Indian reservation is identity which is given to these Red Indians. That is, it is identity which is given to all the tribes of United States of America. And he begins by asking, where are the braves? So from the word itself we can understand that they are very brave people. The faces like autumn fruit. So when he says autumn fruit, we can understand that they were people with ripe wisdom, who stared at the child from the coloured frontispiece. So he says that frontispiece is the front coloured door of the tent in which they were living. And he says he used to stand, the Red Indian used to stand inside and look at his child who is outside. Here it does not mean that the father is physically inside and the child is outside. It means that the father always shares his knowledge with his child and allows the child to go and explore the world. And the monosyllabic chief who spoke with his throat. So here he says that the chief of these tribes always used only one or two words, but the words were full of wisdom and meaning, and it conveyed what he wanted to tell to the other people. And he spoke with his throat, means that he spoke with full authority in a loved voice which controlled them, and also he showed that I am there to protect you. And then he continues by saying, where are the tribes, the feathered bestiaries? Feathered bestiaries means mystic animals. So he's saying, where are these tribes who dressed themselves with feathered, who dressed themselves using the feathers of the animals? And he then goes on to say, oh, Yusuf's animals, erect and red, with fur on their names to make all live things skin. So he calls them as Yusuf animals, because this shows that they were enlightened, talented, and they were resourceful. and he means to say that the colonizers can never have lived in this land without the help from these people. And he says that they were always erect and red. They stood tall and erect, and they decorated themselves with red paint. They used to use red paint on their bodies, and with fur. They always used fur as their garments. And he says that they made all the live things kin. So they looked at the nature, the plants, the animals, everything as they kin, as one among themselves. And he names the things which they looked as very close to them are chief running deer, black bear, old buffalo head. And then he goes to the second stanza where he says, childhood that wished me Indian. So he says that when I was a child, I wished that I was an Red Indian, because he hoped that one after school I would leave the classroom chalk, the varnish smell, the water dust of the street, to join the clean outdoors and the ruckus track. So he says, as a child I wanted to leave all this classroom which was only filled with chalk, varnish smell and water dust, and I wanted to go with these Red Indians who lived in a clean outdoor environment. And he says that was only in the childhood. But always, as on a calendar, they stood that chief with arms akimo, waiting the runaway musket paddling to his shore. He says, but that was all only in the childhood, because now I know I can never meet any of the Red Indians now. And he says, even in childhood, I have only seen these Red Indians on the calendar. And there the chief used to stand with his arms akimo, and he used to wait for the musket which is run away to come back paddling to his shore. And he says, with what strange moccasin sheath that scene is changed. And in the third stanza he says, but all that scenery is changed. The way the Red Indians lived has now changed. With French names, now they are all keeping only modern French names to their children. Without paint, they do not paint themselves with the red paint now. In overalls they bronze, like their nobility expunged, and they do not decorate themselves with bronze metals. In simple, that nobility which was there at one time can never be seen again. He says, beneath the elementary shawls sit like black tents the squaws, while for the tourist brown pennies scattered at the church door, the ragged purposes jump and bite the dust. He says, now they make black tents with their elementary shawls, and they wait for the tourists to come to the church. And near the church door, when these tourists throw the brown pennies will come and get scattered at the church door, and the children will jump and they'll go and fight to pick up these brown pennies, and they'll even bite the dust to take it. That is, they will fight with each other and they will pick up these brown pennies. It shows that they are almost pushed to the level of beggars, where they have to pick up all the coins which are thrown out by the tourists to make their living. And then he goes on in the next answer to say, they past is sold in a shop. That is, the things which they used in the past, they are not using now, but they are making them to sell it in the shop, like the beaded shoes, the sweetgrass basket, the curio Indian, the burnt wood, and the gaudy cloth, and the inch canoes are all now trophies and scalpins for a traveller's den. So the travellers who come there, they buy all this and they decorate their den like trophies. How they will decorate with trophies? They buy all this and decorate their home. Sometimes it is true they dance. He says, of course, the Red Indians, even now they dance, but for a bribe. But that is only when they are given some money. That is, earlier it was a tradition of the Red Indians to dance every day and enjoy their life. They lived with nature, they were very happy and they were satisfied. But now they dance, but they dance only when they are paid. After a deal done, the bedraggled feather and welcome a white mayor to the tribe. And that happens when some men, like here he has mentioned as a white mayor, but when someone comes and when they pay them money, they dress up like the traditional Red Indians, like with the feathered and fur clothes, and with a long feathered hat and on their head, and they used to paint their body with a red paint and wear bronze ornaments, and they will dance in front of him, their traditional dance. This is a grassy ghetto and no home, and these are fauna in a museum kept. And even the grassy ghetto which were their home at one time is not their home now, because they do not live in that natural situation. But these are kept in the museum, like how the animals, fauna means animals, how the animals are kept in the museum. In the same way, the house in which they lived, the home in which they lived at one time, is kept in the museum. The better hunters have prevailed. He says there are even some better hunters now, but now the game losing its blood now makes these grounds its crypt. So now they cannot hunt because it is prohibited, and they also are not practicing it, and so that game is also gone from them. The animals pale, the shine of the fur is lost, bleeded are their living bones, and about them watch as through a mist the pious prosperous ghost. So they have lost everything which they had earlier, and he says all this is because of the colonizers, all that is because of the western influence on them. Everything has gone and only the memories are there, and that memories also, he says, they are like prosperous ghost, because it is so sweet to think about them, but they will never come back again. So this is what he says in this poem. If you have anything more to add on to it, please write it in the comment box. It will be useful to the others who are reading it. Like the video, share it with your friends, and if you have not subscribed my channel, please subscribe. Thank you.